Nestled on the outskirts of a quiet American town, surrounded by fields of wildflowers and centuries-old oak trees, stood an unassuming old farmhouse. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it radiated warmth and history, much like the couple who called it home. Olivia and Marcus Carter, a pair of kind-eyed seniors in their 70s, lived a life that, at first glance, seemed perfectly ordinary. Yet, behind their modest appearances lay a story of innovation, perseverance, and incredible success. Marcus, with his calloused hands and ever-present denim overalls, had once tinkered for hours in their dusty garage, crafting a revolutionary water filtration system. That humble invention would go on to change lives across the world, eventually building Carter Clean Technologies into a global powerhouse valued at over $87 billion. Olivia, equally brilliant in her own right, had turned Marcus's ideas into a thriving enterprise, leading with sharp instincts and a compassionate heart. Despite their immense wealth, Olivia and Marcus chose simplicity over extravagance. They still lived in the same farmhouse where their journey began, drove their trusty old Ford pickup and a modest sedan, and valued practicality over luxury. To them, the essence of a good life wasn't measured in fine clothes or flashy possessions. It was measured in family, community, and honest hard work. That morning, the farmhouse kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and blooming roses from the garden. Sunlight filtered through the windows as Olivia, her silver-streaked hair pinned back neatly, poured a steaming cup into Marcus's favorite chipped mug. It was their 50th wedding anniversary, a milestone that spoke volumes about their devotion and resilience. With a shy, boyish grin, Marcus slid a small handcrafted wooden box across the table. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," he said, his voice rich with years of shared memories. Olivia opened the box to reveal a delicate brooch, carved with intertwined roses, simple, elegant, and deeply personal. Her eyes welled up as she fastened it to her blouse. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Marcus chuckled softly. "Made it out in the shed. Thought it might go well with your Sunday best." Moments like these define their lives, not the fortune in their bank accounts, but the depth of love they had cultivated over decades. Even with all their success, they never lost sight of who they were, two dreamers who built a life together from the ground up. As they sat together sipping coffee, their conversation turned to their beloved grandson, Elijah Carter, who was about to graduate high school. Proud of the young man he was becoming, intelligent, hardworking, and kind, they began to plan a special gift to mark the occasion. What they didn't know was that this simple errand would soon become a powerful lesson for everyone they encountered about dignity, humility, and the danger of judging by appearances. After finishing their coffee, Olivia and Marcus Carter sat quietly for a moment, the kind of silence that only comes after decades of understanding each other without words. The light breeze outside rustled the old oak trees, and somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's rooster crowed, a comforting sound that reminded them of how much the world had changed, and how much had stayed the same. Their thoughts turned to Elijah, their grandson, who would be graduating high school the following weekend. It was hard to believe how quickly the years had flown by. It seemed like only yesterday that Elijah had sat at Marcus's knee in the workshop, asking 1,000 curious questions about how things worked. Now he was a young man preparing to leave for college, following in his grandfather's footsteps by pursuing a degree in engineering. "We should give him something meaningful," Olivia said, setting her mug down thoughtfully. "Something he can carry with him, not just for college, but for life." Marcus nodded. "A gift that tells him where he comes from and reminds him of what's important." For a while, they tossed around ideas. A car? No, Elijah was already working part-time to save for his own. A computer? Practical, but too impersonal. Then Marcus's hand instinctively went to his chest pocket, feeling the familiar weight of an old, worn gold pocket watch. It had been a gift from Marcus's father, a token passed down through generations. "What about this?" Marcus said, pulling out the watch and setting it gently on the table between them. Olivia leaned in, her eyes softening at the sight. The watch had seen better days. Its gold surface was dulled with age, and its chain showed signs of long use. But it still ticked, faithfully, a small miracle in a world that moved too fast. "He's always admired it," Olivia said with a warm smile. "I remember him asking you about it when he was just a little boy." Marcus chuckled. Said it looked like something out of an old western. They both laughed quietly, and for a moment, the room seemed to fill with memories, birthday parties, late-night talks, the smell of sawdust and fresh-baked cookies. "Maybe we could have it restored," Olivia suggested. "Clean it up, maybe add a little something special. A custom engraving, or perhaps a gemstone in the cover." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Something he can treasure and maybe pass down one day." They agreed it had to be done right. This wasn't just about repairing an old timepiece, it was about continuing a legacy. A piece of family history, polished up and ready to guide a new generation. "There's that fancy jewelry store downtown," Marcus said, recalling a newspaper ad he had seen tucked among the coupons. "Regal Jewels," Olivia added with a smile. "They're supposed to be the best." They decided to make a day of it. After dropping off a donation check for the local children's hospital, a cause dear to their hearts, they would stop by Regal Jewels to inquire about restoring the watch. Neither of them gave a second thought to dressing up or making a grand entrance. They were who they were, plain, hard-working folks at heart. As they gathered the watch and prepared to head out, neither Olivia nor Marcus could have anticipated that what seemed like a simple errand would soon become a defining moment for everyone they encountered. Driving into town in Marcus's old Ford pickup truck, Olivia and Marcus Carter talked and laughed as easily as they had on their first dates so many decades ago. The truck rattled a little as it turned onto Main Street, its well-worn engine a familiar background hum. Marcus wore his usual denim overalls over a crisp, clean work shirt, his gray fedora tilted slightly against the spring breeze. Olivia chose her favorite lavender outfit, a modest but well-kept pantsuit she had worn to church many times. They didn't give their appearance much thought. After all, they were simply running a few errands, not attending a gala. Regal Jewels stood proudly at the corner of Main and Jefferson, its grand facade of polished stone and sparkling windows hinting at the luxury within. Inside, crystal chandeliers gleamed against marble floors, and glass display cases housed rings, necklaces, and watches that could easily cost more than most people's cars. As Olivia and Marcus approached the heavy glass doors, a uniformed security guard gave them a quick once-over. His posture relaxed immediately into something subtly dismissive, as if sizing them up and deciding they weren't worth any trouble. Olivia caught the glance but said nothing, sharing a brief, knowing look with Marcus. They had encountered that kind of quiet judgment more times than they could count, and had long since stopped letting it bother them. Inside, the air was perfumed with a faint, expensive scent that spoke of exclusivity. Behind a gleaming reception counter stood a young woman, her makeup flawless, her jewelry sparkling. She glanced up from her computer with a trained smile that faltered slightly when she took in Olivia's simple outfit and Marcus's overalls. "Welcome to Regal Jewels," she said, her tone already cooling. "Do you have an appointment?" Olivia smiled politely. "No, we were hoping to speak with someone about restoring a family heirloom. A pocket watch." The receptionist's fingers paused briefly over the keyboard. "Custom restoration projects typically start at $20,000, she said, almost as a warning. Marcus nodded without hesitation. "That's fine." The receptionist blinked, clearly not expecting such a casual response. Regaining her composure, she offered a tight smile. "One moment, please." She disappeared into a back office, leaving Olivia and Marcus to wait by the grand entrance, their simple presence looking almost out of place among the marble and gold. While waiting, they watched as other customers, clad in designer labels and dripping in jewels, were attended to with warm smiles and gracious service. A tall man in a tailored Italian suit tried on cufflinks under the approving gaze of two associates. A woman in a sleek black dress examined diamond bracelets with a jeweler offering her champagne. Still, Olivia and Marcus stood patiently, unbothered by the disparity. They weren't there to impress anyone. They were there for Elijah, and for the love and history wrapped up in that old pocket watch. Little did they know, the quiet judgments being passed around them would soon lead to a confrontation that would test not just Regal Jewels' service standards, but their very values. After several minutes, a sharply dressed man appeared from the back office, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. His name tag, pinned neatly to his tailored navy suit, read Brandon Whitmore, manager. Brandon's smile was professional but hollow, his eyes betraying the same quiet dismissal the receptionist had shown. "Good afternoon," Brandon said smoothly. "I understand you're interested in a custom restoration." "Yes," Olivia answered warmly, holding out the small, worn pocket watch with both hands. "It's a family heirloom. We'd like to restore it and perhaps add a special engraving for our grandson's graduation." Brandon barely glanced at the watch before straightening to his full height, looking down at the couple with thinly veiled impatience. "Our custom work is highly specialized," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "Projects like these require significant investment, both in time and money." "We understand," Marcus said calmly. "We're willing to do whatever it takes to get it done properly." Brandon's mouth twitched in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Perhaps you might find more affordable options elsewhere. There's a place on 5th Street, Timely's. They offer budget-friendly restoration services." Olivia's polite smile didn't falter. "We came here because we heard you were the best." Brandon's jaw tightened. Around them, a few other customers had begun to take notice. A woman draped in diamonds glanced over, whispering to her companion. Two younger sales associates smirked behind a nearby counter. "Well," Brandon said, clasping his hands together in a patronizing gesture, "we usually require a non-refundable deposit to even begin assessment on custom projects, $5,000. Standard practice for clients of our level." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Olivia's voice remained even. "Is that policy posted somewhere?" "We didn't see any mention of it." "It's understood among our clientele," Brandon replied curtly. "It ensures our artisans' time isn't wasted." The insult hung heavy in the air. The message was clear: he didn't see Olivia and Marcus as worthy of their time, much less their craftsmanship. "I believe," Brandon added with a voice loud enough to catch nearby ears, "that everyone's time would be better spent if you sought services more aligned with your expectations." Whispers rippled through the store. Olivia could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. Marcus reached for her hand, his touch steady and strong. They had faced far worse in their lives, and survived. Without raising her voice, Olivia replied, "You're making a mistake." Brandon chuckled under his breath, then motioned to the security guard. "Please escort these people out." The security guard approached, his earlier disinterest now sharpened into smug authority. As Olivia and Marcus turned toward the exit, Brandon couldn't resist a final parting shot. "There's a mall down the road," he said loudly. "I hear they have a good sale on costume jewelry." As they stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, Marcus wrapped his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he murmured. Olivia's eyes, far from tearful, were bright with determination. "No need to be sorry," she said softly, pulling her phone from her purse. "We're exactly where we need to be." As Olivia Carter tapped a single button on her phone, she and Marcus settled onto a nearby bench just outside the grand entrance of Regal Jewels. The afternoon sun was warm against their backs, the kind of comforting heat that soaked into your bones and made you feel rooted to the earth. They sat quietly, hand in hand, appearing to any passerby like just another elderly couple enjoying a simple afternoon in town. Inside the store, Brandon Whitmore was already regaling two sales associates with an embellished retelling of what had just occurred. He mimicked Marcus's quiet voice and Olivia's humble demeanor to raucous laughter, basking in the smugness of his so-called victory. Several customers chuckled behind polished hands, sipping champagne and admiring their own glittering purchases. The humiliation Olivia and Marcus had suffered was just another forgotten moment to them. But outside, change was coming. Within minutes, a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb, its exterior shining like a mirror under the sun. A uniformed driver stepped smartly from the vehicle, opening the back door for a distinguished gentleman in his early 60s. Dressed impeccably in a dark suit and polished shoes, James Thornton, one of the nation's most respected financial advisors, strode toward Olivia and Marcus with a purposeful air. Beside him walked a younger associate carrying a thick leather portfolio. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter," James greeted warmly, offering a respectful nod. "I came as quickly as I could. What can we do for you?" Standing gracefully, Olivia smiled and extended her hand. "James, thank you. We need to finalize those papers we discussed for the children's hospital donation. And there's something else." James nodded immediately, understanding that today's business had suddenly expanded beyond financial transactions. As Olivia and Marcus signed the documents on the bench, their simple surroundings contrasted sharply with the importance of their actions. A $50 million donation would soon breathe life into a new pediatric wing that would help countless families across the country. Inside the store, employees had begun to notice the unusual activity outside. Faces pressed against the glass, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Whispers rippled across the showroom floor. "Who are those people?" Miranda, a young associate, murmured under her breath. Brandon, catching the movement, squinted toward the street. His self-satisfaction faltered as he recognized James Thornton, someone who normally only worked with ultra-high net worth individuals. Anxiety prickled the back of his neck. Then, another car pulled up. A sleek, silver Rolls-Royce with tinted windows. From it emerged Charles Hamilton himself, the owner and founder of the Regal Jewels chain. Seeing Olivia and Marcus, Charles's face lit up with genuine warmth. He strode toward them, arms open wide, ignoring the stunned looks from onlookers. "Olivia! Marcus! What a wonderful surprise," he boomed. The blood drained from Brandon's face as realization hit him like a freight train. He had just thrown out two of the most influential and generous figures his store had ever, or would ever, see. Inside Regal Jewels, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Gone was the smug laughter, replaced by uneasy silence. Customers and employees alike stared, sensing that something very big, and very wrong, had just happened. And it was only the beginning. Inside Regal Jewels, Brandon Whitmore stood frozen, his earlier smugness evaporating like mist under a harsh sun. The realization hit him fully as he watched Charles Hamilton, the owner himself, embrace Olivia and Marcus Carter with genuine affection and respect. Around the store, whispers grew louder, and customers who had once laughed now exchanged uneasy glances. Brandon tugged nervously at his expensive cufflinks, wishing he could simply disappear. Charles Hamilton, after exchanging a few warm words with the Carters outside, turned and walked toward the grand glass entrance, followed closely by James Thornton, the young assistant, and the couple he had just greeted so warmly. The security guard, who only an hour ago had looked down his nose at Olivia and Marcus, now hurried to open the door with exaggerated deference. As the small group entered, all eyes turned. The chandeliers overhead cast sparkling reflections across the marble floors, highlighting every stunned face in the room. Charles Hamilton's expression was pleasant when he spoke to Olivia and Marcus, but turned cold and hard when his gaze found Brandon. Without raising his voice, he said, "Mr. Whitmore, we need to have a word." The tension in the room was palpable. Employees held their breath. Customers pretended to browse but lingered close enough to hear every word. Brandon swallowed hard. "Sir, there's been some misunderstanding." "There certainly has," Charles interrupted, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that brooked no argument. "You just humiliated two of the finest people I have ever had the honor to know." James Thornton, stepping forward, adjusted his glasses and added, "Olivia and Marcus Carter are the founders of Carter Clean Technologies, valued at over $87 billion. Their humanitarian work alone has transformed thousands of lives." A collective gasp rippled through the showroom. The name was instantly recognizable. Carter Clean Technologies was a household name, synonymous with clean water initiatives, disaster relief, and community rebuilding efforts across America and beyond. Miranda, the young sales associate who had earlier looked down on Olivia and Marcus, covered her mouth in shock. A customer's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor, the sound punctuating the heavy silence. Brandon, now visibly sweating, stammered, "But they didn't look like." Olivia stepped in gently but firmly. "Didn't look like billionaires," she finished for him, her voice cutting through the silence with precision and grace. "And how exactly should billionaires look, Mr. Whitmore?" Brandon had no answer. He simply stood there, shame written all over his face. Marcus, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "We didn't come here expecting special treatment. We only came to honor a family tradition and give a gift to our grandson. Respect shouldn't be reserved for those who flaunt their wealth." Charles Hamilton nodded, his face grim. "And yet here we are." Turning to the staff, Charles's voice carried the weight of finality. "This store was built on a foundation of respect and service. We will not tolerate discrimination against anyone." The message was clear. And for the first time that afternoon, Olivia and Marcus stood not as outsiders, but as a powerful reminder of what true dignity looked like. Brandon Whitmore stood motionless, pale and silent under the weight of Charles Hamilton's words. Around the showroom, a heavy quiet had settled, broken only by the occasional creak of polished leather shoes as employees shifted uncomfortably behind their counters. The grandeur of regal jewels, once so imposing, now felt smaller, almost suffocating. Charles Hamilton's voice remained even but carried unmistakable authority. "Mr. Whitmore, effective immediately, your employment with Regal Jewels is terminated. Kindly gather your belongings and leave the premises." Brandon's face flushed deep red. For a moment, it seemed he might protest, but one look at Charles's unwavering expression silenced any objection. Shoulders slumped, he turned and retreated toward the back office, the clicks of his shoes on marble no longer confident but hollow and defeated. Turning back to Olivia and Marcus Carter, Charles's face softened. "On behalf of Regal Jewels, I offer my deepest apologies for the disgraceful way you were treated today. This is not who we are, or who we aspire to be." Olivia, always composed, gave a small nod. "Thank you, Charles. We're not here to cause a scene." We simply believe respect should never depend on appearance." Several employees approached cautiously. Miranda, the young associate who had earlier dismissed them, stepped forward, her head bowed. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," she said quietly, "I am truly sorry for my behavior. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I was wrong." Marcus gave her a kind, forgiving smile. "It's not about us," he said. "It's about how you treat every person who walks through that door. Rich, poor, dressed fancy or plain, it shouldn't matter." At that, something shifted tangibly in the room. The air grew lighter, as if the entire store had taken a collective breath of humility. A few customers clapped quietly, a gesture of approval for what Olivia and Marcus stood for. Charles motioned toward a senior jeweler who had been standing respectfully at a distance. "Now, if you'd allow us," he said warmly, "we would be honored to personally oversee the restoration of your heirloom. And I'd also like to show you some pieces from our private collection, properly this time, for Elijah's graduation gift." Olivia smiled, her eyes twinkling. "That would be lovely, Charles. But we'll pay full price. We're not looking for favors." Charles chuckled softly. "I wouldn't dare argue with you, Olivia." As they followed the jeweler to a more private, beautifully lit consultation room, the store buzzed anew, but this time with admiration, not condescension. Employees whispered to one another, not about their attire, but about the grace and dignity the Carters had shown. Sitting at the consultation table, Marcus leaned over and whispered to Olivia, "You think this was really necessary?" She patted his hand affectionately. "Not for us, dear. But maybe for the next couple who walks in wearing work boots instead of Italian loafers." In that moment, Regal Jewels wasn't just a store full of sparkling diamonds, it became a place that had been taught a lesson about the real meaning of wealth, character, and respect. Later that afternoon, as Olivia and Marcus Carter stepped out of Regal Jewels with a renewed sense of peace, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the sidewalk. In Olivia's hand was a small, velvet box containing their restored family heirloom, now polished, engraved with Elijah's initials, and adorned with a single, modest sapphire on the cover. It wasn't just a beautiful timepiece, it was a symbol of legacy, of values passed from one generation to the next. As they walked back toward their old Ford pickup, they moved slowly, savoring the moment. There was no rush. After all, the most valuable things in life, family, dignity, kindness, couldn't be bought or hurried. Back inside the jewelry store, a quiet transformation had taken place. Staff members spoke in lower, more respectful tones. The lingering smirks and quick judgments were gone, replaced by a palpable sense of humility. Brandon Whitmore's departure had left an unmistakable mark, but more importantly, the Carters' grace under pressure had set a new standard for how everyone, regardless of appearance, deserved to be treated. Sitting together on the bench for a moment before leaving, Marcus looked out at the town square, where a group of teenagers laughed around a food truck and a mother pushed a stroller past a line of flowering dogwoods. "You know," he said, shifting his old leather jacket over his knees, "the world's gotten pretty fast these days. People judge so quick they forget to really see." Olivia smiled gently. "Maybe today, we slowed it down just a little." They shared a soft laugh, the kind that only years of shared understanding could produce. They hadn't set out to teach a lesson when they walked into Regal Jewels. They had simply followed their hearts, acting out of love for their grandson and respect for a treasured family tradition. And yet, by staying true to themselves, by refusing to respond to cruelty with anger, by standing tall in the face of dismissal, they had accomplished something greater. They had reminded everyone watching that day that wealth wasn't measured by dollar signs or designer labels. True wealth was character. It was kindness. It was the quiet strength to hold your head high, even when the world tries to make you feel small. When Elijah received his gift at his graduation party a week later, he understood instantly that it wasn't just a watch. It was a piece of his family's history, forged in resilience and humility, a tangible reminder that no matter where life took him, he should always lead with respect, never judge hastily, and remember that true worth was found not in appearances, but in actions. As Olivia and Marcus finally drove away down the sun-dappled streets of their small town, the old pickup rattling along comfortably, the lesson they left behind lingered like a warm breeze. Kindness costs nothing, but its value is beyond measure. The story of Olivia and Marcus Carter reminds us that true wealth is not defined by material possessions or outward appearances, but by character, humility, and kindness. In a world that often moves too fast and judges too quickly, their quiet dignity and strength serve as a timeless example. One key lesson is the importance of treating every individual with respect, regardless of how they look or what we assume about them. It's easy to be kind to those who appear successful, but it's an act of true character to extend that same kindness to everyone. Olivia and Marcus showed that real power lies not in titles or wealth but in how we choose to conduct ourselves, especially when facing unfairness. Their story also reminds us that patience, grace, and integrity can be more powerful than anger or confrontation. Rather than responding to humiliation with outrage, they maintained their composure, allowing their true worth to shine through naturally. It was their actions, not their bank accounts, that ultimately commanded the deepest respect. For those of us in the later chapters of life, this story is a meaningful reminder. Our experiences, wisdom, and how we treat others are our greatest legacies. As we engage with our communities, our families, and even strangers, we have the opportunity to model dignity, compassion, and the quiet strength that comes from a life well lived. In the end, the greatest treasures we leave behind are not the things we own, but the kindness and respect we show to the world around us.